That's most of humanity. That's a very, very wide spectrum. And then in Chapter 12, we've been looking at the Beinoni and defining the Beinoni. And now that we understand the structure of the soul, easier to see what the Beinoni is. We got a glimpse of it in the early chapters. And that is when we look at the identity of the Beinoni, the powers of their soul, they essentially look just like a rasha. Their animal soul is active, and it is trying to express, it has not been transformed. However, when we look at the behavior of the soul, thought, speech, and action, the garments we're calling of the soul, there they look exactly like tzaddik. So not once ever does the Beinoni allow the animal soul to express even in conscious, sustained, willful thought. And certainly not in speech, and certainly not in action. So one way we're defining the Beinoni is that individual whose behavior, including sustained thought, is like a tzaddik, but whose identity, whose internal structure, who they are of their soul, is like a rasha. And there's always a struggle between the two, right? As we learned, the nefesh elokit is in the brain, mainly in our consciousness, and extending to the right to the heart, and animal soul is in the left side, and they're just tug-of-warring in there. But in a Beinoni, although the animal soul is pushing, maybe at full strength, the divine soul always pushes back so that thought, speech, and action are as the divine soul would like. And the second definition we're using is one of the relative strengths of each of these souls, where when a rasha, the nefesh elokit has been weakened, so the nefesh bamit can express, and at tzaddik, the nefesh bamit has been weakened or even totally transformed, so only the nefesh elokit can express, even in my heart. And for a Beinoni, both are at full strength. So nefesh bamit is just going strong, doing its thing, wanting to eat food, wanting to have pleasure and whatever. But the nefesh elokit, the other-centered soul, has been strengthened to the point where it's always pushing back at every moment, every microsecond of consciousness. That nefesh bamit says, "Hey, why don't we think about this?" Nefesh elokit says, "No, thank you." Right? And it's constantly pushing back at every level, and it's at full strength. Someone who reaches that state, they're a Beinoni. And it's not just, as we said, that their behavior is like a rasha. It's that their potential behavior, is like a tzaddik. It's that their potential behavior is like a tzaddik as well. So it's not just, okay, for the past 6 months, I've not thought, said, or done anything that a rasha would think, do, or say, therefore I must be a Beinoni. It actually could not occur. My divine soul is at such strength that no matter what the animal soul comes up with, no matter what the scenario, no matter what the possibility, the divine soul will simply say no. There's no possible scenario where the divine soul will not push back and assert itself. So the Beinoni actually has behavioral perfection not just in their actual behavior, but in any possible potential behavior. Which is kind of why the Alter Rebbe says the Beinoni never sin, never will sin. Because in that new identity of the divine soul being that strengthened, they divorce themselves from anything they did. The divine soul simply wouldn't allow that to happen again. It's now matured to the point of saying, well, I was a rasha, so it wasn't me, but now that I'm a Beinoni, of course I'm going to push back. I'm not going to allow that, right? And also in the future, there's nothing that could happen in life, period, that the divine soul is going to say, well, I mean, okay, I'll let that one go by, right? That one's just too juicy, right? No, the divine soul just says, no matter what, I'm always going to push back. I'm at full strength. So there is no potential scenario, there's no potential urge the animal soul or the Yetzer Hara, the expression of the animal soul, could come up with, that divine soul will not simply say, no thank you. That defines a Beinoni. And we also looked that although their inside, their identity is just like a rasha, the divine soul can have moments when they're like a tzaddik. And that is when? Help me out. What time of the day? What during what? Morning prayers, right? Morning prayers. So Beinoni is constantly at war. We're talking about the city and the battle over the city and the two rulers of the city. And the two souls are constantly at each other at war. And the divine soul is always pushing back, always controlling thought, speech, and action. Until that moment in the morning when I sit myself down and I'm not thinking about food, I'm not thinking about TV or whatever, and I focus on the Shema. And we learned there's a flux of divine energy, and I can kind of get on that wave, and that will actually overpower the normal struggle that's in my heart. So a little pause. I know I suggested a couple weeks ago that this should be a tool that we should include. Curious if anyone here has had any insights or experiences, even just saying the Shema in the morning, that seem to corroborate with what he's talking about. I see some nodding. Anybody?
Oh, yeah. I've been doing it now for a year, and it's helped me tremendously.
Here, so maybe tell us to the microphone. we got people online listening too.
I've been doing it now for a couple of years, actually. But I'm going a little further. I'm putting on my tefillin every morning.
Okay.
And saying the Shema and a little bit of the Amidah.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that it's very relaxing. And the days I'm not able to do it fully, just a real short little Shema, it's not quite as full for me, but it's still a relaxing part of my day in the morning.
Good. So how would you describe the quality of when you're in the Shema vis-a-vis kind of your self-centered identity and your other-centered identity? Do you sense that there's a sort of reprieve there, or a boost there, or something?
I'm not so sure it's a boost, but it's more of a peaceful time.
Ah.
It is for me. It's time. It's my time.
Yeah.
To communicate with the Ein Sof, and I'm not so sure. It's more peaceful for me more than anything else.
Okay. So perhaps normal times when something might be stressing you out, this time seems so perhaps that speaks to the sense that the struggle is gone for a bit. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think we're not Beinanim, so we each approach this as a normal person, a Rasha, in our own way. And I'm curious, do you feel like for the rest of the day there's any kind of impressions you talked about that, like later in the day if something comes up, you're perhaps a little more able to reach back to that moment of peace and insert it, or no?
I'm not so sure I'm that far yet.
No?
Okay. But I do say the Shema before I go to bed, so that gives me a little bit of peace.
Yeah.
And knowing that I've said it.
So is it a focusing on a meditative state? Does it take you to a meditative state?
It's more, yeah, it does. I also include a Misha Beirach every morning to watch over my family. And I list all the names, just watch over them, keep them healthy, keep them safe, keep them warm. So that kind of helps me a little bit too. So
good.
Yeah, it's more like a meditation type state. 10 minutes, 15 minutes, that's all it is. It's really fast. So you kind of, you sort of go into it for about 10, 15 minutes, and then you come out of it and say, okay, now I got to start my whole day. I got to start, I got to do this and this.
Grounding for you? Does it give you a sense of
reset? Like a reset. Okay, let's get this day started. Let's wake up.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my experience. I know.
So I encourage everyone.
Yeah, I found it very. Michael turned me on to it, and I find it very rewarding every day.
Yeah, because Rick and I we're in chapter 24. So we've been learning before this class started. So we introduced the idea, and I really recommend everyone.
Yeah,
if you're gonna.
I highly recommend it.
If you're gonna use this technique actively now, having the information, wanting to put it into practice, having some kind of prayer moment in the morning, I would say a minimum the Shema, and you can add the Amidah if you want, or the Haftarah, a healing prayer, but a minimum of that, just so you have a moment where you can get in touch with the highest point, your highest potential point in the day vis-a-vis this technique, and that is a touchstone that you can come back to for the rest of the day. So whatever level we're at, whatever domain we're working on, to move closer to being a tzaddik or a Beinoni, so to speak, the Shema in the morning, that is my anchor throughout the rest of the day. So now when the animal soul really is burning to think about something or say something or do something, I can go back, and that will be just like the Beinoni has a tool to strengthen themselves for the day. We also have this tool, and even if we can't have a moment like a tzaddik, we can have, as you described, a moment that feels like it's a moment of peace, a moment of meditative tranquility, a reset, however you want to describe it.
Let me add one more thing. That I'm not at all fluent in Hebrew, so I don't read Hebrew very well, because I can read a little bit, but not too much. So I say some of the prayers in Hebrew, but I say a lot of the prayers in English too. I know they're not quite the same that way. Michael has told me that, but to me, it's just as worth it.
Yeah, that is halacha. If you don't understand Hebrew, it's considered in many ways advantageous to pray in a language you speak.
Right.
And spiritually, we're not concerned that there's a language God won't understand. right? So God can speak any language and can converse in any language. Yes?
Well, I haven't been saying the Shema as soon as I get up, but for the past 7.5 months, I've been coming to morning minion.
Yes, of course.
And
That's,
all
yeah.
of that has given me a sense of support and comfort that I don't know where else I would have gotten it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So yes, so one could do it. My suggestion is to at least do it on your own, but ideally doing it with a minion and with a community is much more powerful. So no question, if you're coming to a minion, then no need to do it on your own. That's an even better setup, more helpful, right? And then we looked at the concept that it's not simply that I'm sitting taking time to meditate and that's going to give me tranquility, but in fact we're recognizing the way the universe is being created at every moment, and that there are waves in that anything spiritual is not still, it's not stuck, it's always moving. In Kabbalah and Judaism, everything is in flux. So there's a time in the day when what we call the intellect of the cosmos is amplified, right? Just like in our day, there's a time in the day when my intellect is amplified, there's a time when I'm sleeping, there's a time when I'm exhausted. And if I were to have time with a, say, therapist or, say, with a teacher, would I want to spend an hour with them when they were fresh and ready and fed and had focus on me and could really engage intellectually? Or would I want to come at 4 in the morning when they're asleep and sit there and look at them, right, and try and have a conversation? Or something in between. Would I want them when they're exhausted at the end of the day, or would I want them when they just woke up in the morning and haven't kind of gotten something together? So there's a best time in the day for us to engage with each other intellectually and emotionally. And that is a model for what's happening in the cosmos, right? There's a best time in the day when the cosmic intellect, so to speak, is amplified and is flowing into the world, into creation at full force. And it starts at a time and ends at a time, and we want to catch that wave. The only difference is with us, it's a question of limitations, right? I can only focus for so long, and there's times when I need to refresh. With the Ein Sof, it's not a limitation. It's just simply a byproduct of a concept we'll learn later called Rotzo V'Shov, which is rushing forward and then drawing back, and that every spiritual reality flows in that manner of a Rotzo V'Shov. So the Ein Sof is creating an intellectual wave that then flows into the cosmic emotions, into the world, and that's coming down to the world with great force at a certain time, and then it flows back up as well, and the energy that is creating the world is actually creating that wave. And if we want to most powerfully bind our intellect with the cosmic intellect, that's the window to do it. So sometimes people look at these times, what time does Shacharit start? What time does it end? When do you have to say Shema? And it seems like we're just real stuck on rules. To illustrate, I would say, if we knew there was a solar eclipse happening that we could see, starting at 11:42 and ending at whatever 1:15, I don't know how long they last. Okay, say I wasn't a person that was into rules, and I said, you and your times, I've got lunch plans. I'm going to get my visor. I'm going to show up at 10 in the morning. I'm going to watch the eclipse, right? I mean, so what if I'm a little bit early, right? I'm not going to be stuck by your exact times. So we look at the person and say, well, you can go and look, but it's not happening, right? I mean, the eclipse where you are, you're going to see it from this time to this time, and that's just how the planets line up. Like you can go earlier, but you're not going to see the eclipse. So spiritual realities are similar. There is a time when Chochmah, Bin, and Dad of Atzilus are flowing with full force into the world, and that's the time we want to bind our Chochmah, Bin, and Dad to that flow, and that creates this amplified state in the heart where we can guide emotions, get excited about Jewish stuff, and really give the animal soul something to push back at, something to push it back, and something for it to latch onto and say, well, maybe this is actually going to give me pleasure instead of whatever I had in mind. Make sense? So that's the moment of the Beinoni. And then we looked at, of course, after prayer, that state of sublimity goes away, and the Beinoni goes back to the struggle, but they still have that impression of that moment of prayer, and that will strengthen them through the day. And then ultimately he said, the animal soul never can enclose itself in thought, speech, or action, and the reason why is a very key concept we looked at. The brain rules the heart. Hamoach shalit al halev. This is like up in lights. This is a big title category here. That we know that the brain rules the heart. That's on page 181 in chapter 12. We know the brain rules the heart, and it's not something we need to practice or meditate or strengthen. We need to actually do it, right? And we can strengthen our capacity to do it. But the quality of the brain ruling the heart is not something we need to create. It's there from birth. It's in our hard wiring. It's how we were created. We see it in mundane life. We talked about examples. I'm fighting with someone, and suddenly someone walks in, and immediately, whoop, it's done. In life we see the mind can control the heart whenever it wants to, if it wants to. So we have to recognize that and inspire our mind to control our heart in every situation. And there's two aspects of it. One, the mind can focus on whatever it wants. So if I think there's a thought on my mind that I can't get out of my mind, perhaps notice that I always have the potential to turn my mind to the exact opposite. I always can focus my mind on something else. No matter how many times that thought wants to engage again, I just keep returning my mind to the exact opposite. And I can always do that no matter how many times it happens. And second, that the mind can eventually guide the heart. Right? The mind can control the heart in terms of thought, speech, and action at every time. So that whatever my heart is thinking, my brain doesn't have to focus on it. I don't have to talk about it or do it. But also over time, I can create new pathways where the heart now gives its energy to the compass bearing of the mind. So the mind controlling the heart is going to be our tool for the two main techniques that come up, the long short path and the short long path, which we'll describe later. And then finally from Michelet, right, we have this quote that King Solomon says, "Wisdom surpasses folly as light surpasses darkness." Wisdom surpasses folly as light surpasses darkness. And we finish with a conversation about what do we learn from this? How is Chokhmah of the divine soul better than the impulses of the Yetzer Hara? In what way is that advantage like light being better than darkness? Because it's obvious. We all want to be mature and wise. We want to navigate well. We want to make good decisions. Of course we want to. So what am I learning from this? Two things that we discussed. One is that when you have a dark place and you bring a little bit of light in, a little bit of light dispels a lot of darkness. It's not one-to-one. It's not like my air conditioner example where I'm in a hot room in Arizona and I turn on the air conditioner and it's running, and 10 minutes later it's like a little bit cooler, and the sun is heating up the air and the air conditioner is cooling the air, and they're battling, and over time it gets cooler. It's just the opposite. One little candle in a big dark cavern, and suddenly the whole place, darkness is dispelled. And second is, there is no struggle. Right? We might think of our internal space as being one where I'm just full of this heat, and I'm trying to cool it down with the air from my brain, the cool air, and it's working, and they're fighting. And if I imagine it like that, I may experience it like that and give the darkness, the folly, more weight and reality than it need be. But a more appropriate metaphor might be light in a dark place where there is no struggle. Because the darkness that was there, it had no true identity, it had no true definition, it was just the absence of light. And the moment light's there, darkness is gone with zero struggle whatsoever. So the metaphors we pick to extend into our inner space, they have an impact on how we are able to master the flow of our soul through consciousness, and they're very important. Even if it's not a conscious image we have, if we think of our insides as this, between masterful and counterproductive, then we're going to experience this. If we recognize Chokhmah of the divine soul is like a light in darkness, okay, that's a brand new reality inside. It gives me a new freedom for self-mastery. So we're on page 183. This analogy, Perush, Kmo she'or yesh lo yitron ushlita umemshala al hachoshech.
This analogy means that just as light has superiority, power, and dominion over darkness,
שמעט אור גשמי דוחה הרבה מן החושך שנדחה ממנו מעליו וממילא.
So that a little physical light banishes a great deal of darkness, which is displaced automatically and inevitably without any effort on the part of the light.
So you see very, very, very clearly he's stating the quality of light and darkness. כך נדחה ממילא סיכלות הרבה של הקליפה בסדרה אחרה שבחלל השמאלי.
So is there driven away automatically much fluidness of the kalipa and the sitra akara of the animal soul located in the left part of the heart?
So I may think, I've been doing something for many years, it's a pattern, it's going to be hard to dislodge. Here he's saying, think of it as light and darkness. Just a little bit of the inspiration of the divine soul will just, all that stuff will vanish. We'll create new patterns throughout our brain and our heart, and it happens instantaneously and without struggle. כמאמר רבותינו זיכרונם לברכה, אלא אם כן נכנס בו רוח שטוס וכו'.
As indeed our sages say, man does not sin unless the spirit of folly enters him.
So he's actually touching on many, many things that he will expand on later. As you see, he touched on the ideas of a Rasha Tzaddik and a Beinoni in the earlier chapters, and I was expanding on them. Each of these, if you've learned it, and some of us have, is just introducing and touching on something that will be one or several chapters in the future. And this idea of the spirit of folly, and that really we wouldn't do something counterproductive if we could see the true dynamic of what's happening, we wouldn't touch it. The only reason we ever touch it, the only reason I might allow myself to get angry or to do something, have a moment of weakness or hurt someone around me, is because I think, well, it's not going to be so bad, I'll make up for it, it doesn't really disconnect me from my highest self, it's just a moment, right, I'm only human. All these rationalizations of the animal soul, they create a spirit of, folly is not the best translation, but it's hard to translate shtus, right? Shtus is like craziness, and yeah, and self-delusion and stupidity, but not stupid like, but it's like it's a stupidity you just want to dismiss. It's not like it's not like a deep-seated stupidity. It's just like it was folly, right? I mean, it has a sense of like you're not really thinking straight, right? So there's a sort of a covering over our judgment that happens that lets us slowly make counterproductive decisions and let it build up until it's our new normal. And we think, well, really, how bad can it be?
Thus our sages describe the desires of the animal soul as folly. Hence they are automatically banished by the wisdom of the divine soul that is in the brain.
So we can, if we apply it, as long as the divine soul is actively there with its goals in mind and actively asserting itself, then we can use our mind to actually guide what's happening in our heart. And we can say, this impulse I'm not interested in, and I'm not going to think about it or talk about it or do it. That I can do. And no matter what sort of rationalization was there beforehand, the divine soul can just clear that out if we assert it. אשר רצונה למשול לבדה בעיר, להתלבש בשלושה לבושיה הנזכרים לאל, בכל הגוף כולו כנזכר לאל.
Which desires to rule alone over the city, the body, and to pervade the entire body by means of its aforementioned three garments.
Right, so this is a review. As we've seen, the divine soul wants to do this. In fact, this is tied to why a person has a life, right? Why a soul comes into a body. It sort of looks like a blank slate, and you can give it any title you want. It could be have as much fun as you want. It could be travel and see as much of the world as you want. It could be make as many friends as you want. We seem to have this life, and we seem to have the ability to put a bulletin on top of it, or a title, and define it any way we want. In Kabbalah, the reason divine soul comes into a body is to actually elevate the physical nature and the animal soul, so that the animal soul and the physical nature learn to follow the compass bearing of the divine soul. And there's no other reason for a divine soul to come down here, because the divine soul doesn't need to be fixed. The divine soul has no. It's called something needs repair. Has no defects in it, right? It can be elevated in a sense by its time down here, but it has no defects. Doesn't need to be repaired. The only reason a divine soul comes down is in order to do this, to refine our animal soul and to refine our physical body and to elevate a share of the world by doing that. So don't think it's just, well, I got two souls and I get to pick which one should express. This is actually the only reason the divine soul comes into a body, is to do this, is to express it, to rule alone over the thought, speech, and action of the physical body. שהם מחשבה, דיבור, מעשה של תרי"ג מצוות התורה כנזכר לעיל.
Namely, thought, speech, and action connected with the 613 mitzvot of the Torah, as we discussed above.
And as we said, we're looking at mitzvahs as, from tzavta, a point of connection, a way we can connect with the Ein Sof, which should be impossible. Right? But when we learn Torah as we're doing, we connect with chokhmah of the Ein Sof, which is similar to what we described in prayer, that chokhmah of the Ein Sof is currently flowing down through the cosmos and going through many, many stages of this chain reaction of creation and creating the world. And we can actually, by what we're doing now, by understanding and binding our mind with chokhmah of the Ein Sof, we can actually create a link. And also the mitzvahs, when we do something in the physical world, it looks like I'm just shaking a lulav, as we say, but to my soul, I'm actually attuning my ratzon of my soul with the ratzon of the Ein Sof. So we're talking about connecting points to bridge the divide between a limited created creature and an infinite Ein Sof. Why don't you go on in the Beinoni?
In the Beinoni, this desire of the divine soul in the brain, that it alone pervades his thought, speech, and action, and hence his entire body, controls the lustful desires which the animal soul arises in his heart. Moreover, it prevents their actual expression because of the natural supremacy of the mind over the heart and of the holiness over evil. But if the divine soul of the Beinoni indeed dominates his every area of practical expression, alone dictating his every thought, word, and deed, why is he not considered a tzaddik?
Right. So then now we've defined what a Beinoni is and what a Beinoni can do in terms of guiding thought, speech, and action by asserting the mind over the heart, and also by including holiness in that, because if we can, as we said, if we can guide our heart with our mind in neutral matters, when it comes to matters of holiness, of teaching our kids, of helping people who are hungry, even more so, the mind has control over the heart, because we just know in our guts, well, this is the right thing to do, so it's added power over the heart. However,
nevertheless, he is not deemed a tzaddik at all.
So hold on, I'm looking at this person on the outside. What's the difference between him and a tzaddik? Every thought, everything they say, everything they do is other-centered, altruistic, connected to something productive in Judaism. Why aren't they tzaddik? Now we know, right? Who can answer? Why is this person not tzaddik?
But he still gets those bad thoughts.
Right. So the
Animal thoughts.
so Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchut of the animal soul are still alive and kicking, right? Yeah. So they're trying to rule the city. For the dominance they've established that the light of the divine soul has over the darkness and shtus of the klipa, the animal soul, which is automatically dispelled, is limited
to the divine soul's aforementioned three garments. Only in thought, speech, and action does the divine soul of the Beinoni dominate his animal soul.
So this we need to keep really clear. Right? We've talked about it a lot. But once we have a more sophisticated understanding of the structure of the soul, now we can see what this Beinoni really is. Try and think, if you could explain this to somebody 6 months ago or whatever, when we were in chapter 1, 2, and 3, well, this is what a Beinoni is. You really need the background. You need to have the user's manual info before you can start to actually apply it. Right? So once we have the category, we understand what the attributes of the soul are and what the garments are, now we can distinguish the garments I can control all the time. All three of them, and every one of us can do it. The attributes of the soul, probably not, right? We can do our part to, refine them a little bit. We can dislodge them. We can kind of weaken them, loosen them. But to really transform them, very likely, all of us, after a lifetime of work, those attributes will be just what they were when you're born or stronger. Yeah, it doesn't mean we can let them express. We can always allow the divine soul to express at every moment, every time, every one of us. V'lo b'mehuta v'atzmuta al mehuta v'atzmuta shel haklipa.
But the essence and core of the divine soul does not dominate the essence and core of the animal soul deriving from the kalipa.
Right, so mahut comes from mahu, what is it? Right, etzem, its core, say. So the real identity of the soul, of the divine soul, doesn't dominate the identity and essence of the animal soul in a Beinoni or certainly in a Rasha. Right? It's also described in Steinsaltz. This is on page 298 if you have a copy of this hard-to-find book at the bottom. The Beinoni exercises the advantage of light over darkness, of wisdom over folly, only in the expressions of his soul, not in the soul itself. When two thoughts of equal magnitude, one of holiness and the other of the foul struggle for supremacy, the former will oust the latter. But even if a person spends his entire lifetime thinking only holy thoughts, this will in no way banish the underlying forces of evil in his soul. The Beinoni has transformed the external face of his soul, the manner in which his soul expresses itself outwardly, speech and deed, and inwardly, thought. And this is an interesting definition, that the soul expresses itself both outwardly and inwardly, and speech and action are how my soul expresses outwardly to all this around me. But my soul always expresses inwardly, and that's thought. So, interesting definition of the three garments. One that expresses inwardly, two that express outwardly. But the soul itself has not been changed, nor not its unfathomable depths, nor its consciously felt wills, desires, and passions. And here too, we have a distinction that's beautiful, that if we look inward into our soul, there's stuff we're pretty consciously aware of. I like this, I don't like this, I want to do this, I don't want to do that, I hate this, I love that. But then underneath that, there's what we call the subconscious, which if you sit and look at your soul and gaze inward, some of it becomes apparent, but it just keeps going, right? Deeper and deeper and deeper. There's no end to the depth of the soul. So in all of these, whether it's the unfathomable depths, whether it's the real deep core of the soul that only truly self-mastered people can really get at, or whether it's just the superficial layers that are just popping up and creating ideas, none of that has been changed. That whole sea of the soul is just what it was. These exist within the Beinoni exactly as they exist within the Rasha. The only difference being that the Beinoni prevents their implementation and fruition in practice. Yeah?
I'm still having a hard time understanding if you're controlling all your thoughts, speech, and actions outwardly,
Yeah.
how do you know that you're not controlling them inwardly?
You don't.
Okay, so for you would think of yourself as a tzaddik.
God forbid. I took an oath. Right? So you don't. The truth is you don't. If there's super deep conscious, subconscious residue in a Beinoni, that where they've basically, and we haven't gone through all the definitions of the Beinoni, so there's pieces we're missing about the Beinoni that prays all day, right? But essentially, if you've just been a Beinoni for a long time, and maybe you pray and that effect lasts all the day, and so you just the animal soul could awaken, but it's just always sleeping, but it could awaken any time, then consciously there's no difference between you and the tzaddik. A Beinoni might look inside and think, okay, there's no animal soul left, but really it's just dormant, and they don't want to let their guard down. A tzaddik could look inside and say, oh, there's no animal soul left, and they may be right. Or they may look inside and say, well, there's no animal soul left apparently, but maybe I'm wrong, so maybe I'm a Beinoni, and they'd be wrong. So that's why he's going to get soon to the Rabbah question of why Rabbah, who was the greatest tzaddik of his time, said, for instance, I'm a Beinoni, right? And good luck to the rest of you, right? It's like Einstein saying, I'm sort of like a postgraduate level, That's where I'm at right now. Albert Einstein. I know the labels thing. I know. But this is a class. This is a class that involves labels, right? So Yes, the Beinoni might not be aware, if they're a very high level of Beinoni,
Right, that there's anything left.
but no one should ever assume that they're a tzaddik. That's the oath we took. And the reason is then I might let down my guard, and then I could fall well, well below my station. There's no advantage to assuming that I'm a tzaddik. I mean, what's the advantage? Right, so why? And there's a disadvantage, a big one.
You would act the same way. I mean, you would think the same way. Everything would be
Well,
the
maybe
same.
not. Because if I'm a Beinoni, I'm always wary of every instinct that comes up, every impulse. Oh, maybe I should make a connection with this person, right? Well, why do I want to do that? Is it for them or is it for me, right? Do I enjoy talking to this person for my own reasons? Is there some way they could help me, or am I really concerned about them? Right, so every impulse that comes up, if you think you're a Rasha or perhaps a Beinoni, then you're always going to be wary. You're going to examine. The divine soul will scan every possible impulse for trouble, and will say, I'm not sure the reason I want to have an appointment with this person is because they need my help. I think maybe it has to do with me and what I want, right? If I think I'm a tzaddik, then what's the problem? I want to make an appointment with this person. Of course, that's a godly thought. I'm a tzaddik. Why should I examine it? Let me make the appointment, right? And we see lots of people, unfortunately, who are held up as tzaddikim in the world. I don't know if you're aware. And then 15, 20 years later, it turns out there was sexual abuse going on, there was power plays going on, there was control going on, and all kinds of horrible stuff. So we see it play out that if someone says, well, this is a tzaddik, the whole community says this is a tzaddik, and the person perhaps themselves says, well, I'm a tzaddik, then they stop being careful. And really the most lofty people, the most spiritual people, the most well-meaning people, you can fall right back down to the bottom and even lower. Right? So there's really a big advantage to the oath that we start off with. It says, even if the whole world says you're a tzaddik, think of yourself like a Rasha. Like a Rasha.
Like a Rasha.
Yeah.
Not a Rasha, like a Rasha.
Don't give it away. Okay. Sorry, I lost where we were. Here. כי מהותה ועצמתה של נפש הבעמית שמהקליפה שבחלל השמאלי לא נדחה כלל ממקומו בבינוני.
For in the Beinoni, the essence and core of the animal soul originated in Kalipa, which is lodged in the left part of the heart, remains undisturbed, not displaced by the divine soul.
So the attributes of the animal soul have not been shifted or transformed. אחר התפילה שאין רשפה אש עבד השם בהתגלות ליבו בחלל הימני.
After prayer, when the burning love of God is no longer in a revealed state in the right part of the heart, as it was during prayer, when the love flowed openly and palpably felt there.
So for a Beinoni, that time of prayer in the morning has really been amplified so that they're just another person. They're in another space. The feelings they're feeling for godliness, for wholeness, for connection, for doing mitzvahs are just powerful and overwhelm the left side of the heart. Right? So the most beautiful moment you can imagine when you haven't seen your grandkids in 6 months and you get off the plane and you know they're going to run and give you a hug and you're bursting with the wanting to connect. We feel that way about the Ein Sof. We feel that passionate drive and love about abstract goodness, call it. For us, it may be simply, I'm thinking less about myself and I'm thinking more about being a good person and connecting, and I have a nice warm feeling about it that I don't have at other times, right? So if that's our peak of our flow for that day, good, work with that, and see if the next day we can get that peak a little bit higher and work with that and build. But in a Beinoni, it's a very, very intense moment of joy and love and connection and longing and all the things we experience around our physical drives. כי אם תוכל רצוף אהבה מסותרת שהיא אהבה הטבעית שבנפש האלוקית כמו שהתבאר לקמן.
Rather, the love is, after prayer, only on the inside. His heart is inlaid with hidden love, meaning that love which is natural to the divine soul, not the revealed love born of meditation that the Beinoni experiences during prayer, but a natural hidden love of God, as will be discussed further in chapter 18, that in the heart of every Jew lies a hidden natural love of God.
So the Alter Rebbe is actually giving us a travel itinerary for the next dozen or so chapters, where we've learned there's two techniques that we're going to apply from this book. One is called the long short path, and the other is called the short long path. And good luck remembering which is which, because I always forget myself, right? So the long short path, he's just been describing. That is engaging my intellect to meditate on and contemplate and visualize and embed divine concepts like the Shema. There's only one being, right? Try to integrate that in your brain for 10 years and see if it actually lodges somewhere. You really have to work hard. But once you integrate it and you connect to it through dot and create emotions, now you can return to that, call it material of contemplation, and you can re-engage those emotions at will. So once you've done that first technique, which very quickly the long short path is a pathway of intellectual meditation in order to inspire guided emotions that we think are appropriate and helpful. Now I have those in my life. So I meet a moment of struggle in the day and I have choice A or choice B. Am I going to hurt someone around me because I feel insecure? Am I going to behave maturely? I can now return to that contemplation, even for a moment. I can create new emotions, and now I can re-engage with reality and be more like a Bainani and be mature instead of insecure. And we're using intellectual contemplation and meditation to create new pathways, integrate mind and heart, and create new emotions based on what I think are appropriate emotions for a Jew in a life. If that's something that isn't happening right now, today, not working for me, or in general, that's not my thing, for whatever reason, there's a second technique we'll learn starting in chapter 18, which is the short, long path. And that is relying on something that is actually there already. It's there already, right? Every parent and child have a bond that's there, period. And no matter how many years of broigus or how many fights they may have had or how much distance there is, underneath all the broigus and distance, we know there's still this bond, right? It can't be erased, it can just be suppressed. But a parent and a child, no matter how bad things might get, God forbid, that bond is always there. There's always some kind of a hidden love. And if they could uncover it, it's not a love they need to create or meditate on or craft. They just have to uncover it, and they already have it. So that's the second technique that we will also learn how to use, that we inherit a love. And this is real epigenetics from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We're actually dealing with a love that our ancestors created that's so powerful that each of us has a piece of it hidden within us. And we'll learn how to simply uncover that love so we don't have to build anything intellectually. Right? So in this case, he was describing a Bainani that during prayer is using the long, short path. They're meditating on the Shema, ideas about the source of their physical being and the source of their soul or what have you. And they're creating a powerful, powerful love and awe. But then after prayer is done, now they're back in the world in the struggle. And they may rely just on the love that's hidden in their heart, and they just have to keep getting the folly and the schmutz off of it so that they know, well, no matter how much my parents frustrate me, I love them. Schmutz? Didn't say schmutz in there? Was that? I thought it was in one of the notes, perhaps. He'll use some synonyms for it. Trust me. Right?
That's a Yiddish word, isn't it? Schmutz?
Schmutz, yeah.
Yes, it is, isn't it?
It is, yeah. וזה יכול להיות סיכלות הכסיל הרע בהתגלות ליבו בחלל השמאלי.
Then after prayer, when the love of God is no longer revealed in the heart of the Benoni, it is possible for the folly of the wicked fool, the animal soul, to reveal itself in the left part of the heart.
And so at that point, now the Bainani's back to the struggle over the city, and the animal heart, the animal soul is really pushing back. להתהוות כן תאווה לכל ענייני גשמיות עולם הזה, בין בהיתר בין באיסור חס ושלום.
Craving all physical matters of this world, whether permitted, except that they should be desired and used as means of serving God, whereas at this time the Bainani craves them for their own sake, for the pleasure they provide, or whether prohibited, God forbid.
So now the Yetzer Hara is pushing and sending ideas and lobbing rocks up at the brain saying, think about this, and it might be about something that is permitted. Oh, there's some cheesecake that my wife is saving for dinner. Maybe I'll just have an extra piece. Maybe it won't be enough for dinner, but it's not an avera. It's kosher. I'm going to say a blessing. Really, or even just, there I am sitting at a meal and someone served the cheesecake, right? We talked it in chapters 7 and 8, I believe. There's a difference between eating something and enjoying it so that I can use that energy to help the world and be a better person, and really eating it as a fresser and just saying, oh, I love cheesecake, and all I'm focusing on right now is just that tastes really good. I'm enjoying it. Now, I'm not destroying the world. I'm not breaking any Jewish laws as a traditional Jew, as a Reformed Jew, no matter what. But if that's my animal soul eating right now, I'm strengthening the animal soul. I'm not being a refined person. I'm eating like an animal, right? And we're humans. We want to eat like humans, and you can still enjoy the food, but you want to actually ennoble the food as you relate to it. You want to be mindful that the food also has a soul and a divine spark, and now I'm in a relationship with it, and it's my job to elevate it, not degrade it. And then, of course, there's my famous bacon cheeseburger, or whatever it is. That if it's something outside of what I'm calling kosher as a Reformed Jew, then why would I want to think about eating it, right? So both of those categories may occur to the Beinoni at that point. Kilu lo hitpalel klal, as though he had never prayed. Ela shebidvar isur ein ola ole bedato lasot haisur bepoel mamash chas v'shalom.
His craving is limited only in that in the case of the craving for prohibited matter, it does not enter his mind to transgress an actual practice, God forbid.
Right, so let's sit in this for a moment here, right? Because I'm getting ideas, right? Impulses are dropping into my brain. Now, a Russia might actually sit there and think about it. And a Beinoni is just going to say, no, I'm not going to. But he makes a point here, it doesn't enter into my mind to transgress an actual practice, God forbid. Right? So this is a little bit different. He's not saying you don't actually seize upon that idea and think about it in a sustained way. He's actually saying, like, it would occur to you as something that could be done, but not occur to you as something that you would actually practically do. And this is an interesting distinction. There's a couple ways to get at it. One example people often give, and Steinsaltz gives, is imagine I was a peasant in a kingdom, and the king was this very, very noble, regal figure, very distant from me, and I lived in my little hut on my dung heap or whatever it was. And one day I saw the king's daughter go by in a chariot, and she was the most beautiful young woman I'd ever seen, right? I mean, royal and regal and wise and beautiful and dressed in the finest. Now, my physical brain might say, wow, that's a beautiful woman that any man would want to marry, perhaps, right? However, I'm a peasant, and it wouldn't actually occur to me to try and go and marry the king's daughter. That's just so outside of my world. Even though it would kind of occur to my mind, someone might want to do that, I'm never going to actually go and knock on the king's door and say, excuse me, I'd love to meet your daughter. She's really nice. Do you think we could spend some time together? Like, are you crazy? I would never do that. I'm a peasant. It's just outside of what I would do. And similarly, you or I walking down the street might walk by a truck, a Brinks truck that's picking up or delivering cash to a bank. And it might occur to us, wow, I bet there's a lot of cash in that truck, right? But I'm not really practically thinking, okay, so I'd have to get a gun and have to get some friends and I want to find out what the guards are doing. Like, no, I'm not going to rob this Brinks truck. That's crazy, right? So there are thoughts that kind of occur to our brains that we would say, oh, yeah, I could do that. I could eat that last piece of cheesecake. Let me think about it. And there's thoughts that occur to us where I could say, I guess there's a lot of money in the Brinks truck, but I mean, I'm never going to rob it, right? I'm never gonna call the king and ask to speak to his daughter. So there's a difference between, we don't think of them as practically applying. And another way, that's the way a Beinoni sees every one of the impulses of the animal soul. The animal soul is there saying, yeah, I'd like to do this, let's try that, how about this? And the Beinoni just looks at it and it's like, okay, that occurred to me, but of course I'm never going to do it, right? I'm also not going to think about it. I'm going to put it in my mind. But the quality of the relationship to it is such that it's another person that might do that. It's not me. Yeah, I'm not sure if I got that across, but let me give Steinsaltz's. One of the definitions of the Beinoni is that he's so far removed from certain things forbidden outright, that they do not occur to him as practical possibilities. Indeed, everyone has certain limits that he will never exceed, and that he's unable to even consider the possibility of exceeding, things for which any desire or lust is merely theoretical. These limits vary from individual to individual and from society to society, but every personality structure precludes certain acts as inconceivable. Ibn Ezra, explaining the last of the Ten Commandments, you shall not covet, brings an example of a simple peasant who happens to see the king's daughter. He may think of her as beautiful and desirable, but he does not desire her and will never even think of trying to obtain her, because he knows that she is unobtainable. To the Beinoni, anything forbidden by the Torah falls into this category. The thought of something forbidden might arise in the mind of a Beinoni, but not the thought of actually doing it, because he knows that this is something he cannot ever do. Right, so for us as well, there's things that we have that relationship with, and although, yeah, it can occur to me that that's something that can be done, I'm just so divorced from it that it's just a theoretical thought. And we want to take more of the things that are perhaps not theoretical thoughts, but practical thoughts, where I fantasize over the conversation I'm going to have with that person because of what they said to me, or I fantasize about whatever, and slowly move them into the category of, yeah, I mean, I know I could do it, but of course I wouldn't do it, right? And that's one of the ways that the mind can control the heart, that the Chokhmah, the divine soul, can slowly transform, even for Russia, how the qualities of the soul are firing and are active.
It's really easy for the big things. We never consider murder. We never consider stealing. But it's very difficult for the little things, like eating that bacon cheeseburger.
Right. But for what's his name?
We would never consider robbing the bank. I would never.
But different people are different, right? For what's his name? Gustav. What's the Mexican drug lord that was just arrested and imprisoned? I'm sure for him, killing one person is a little thing.
That's true.
Yeah. So I mean, each person at their level, right? What you feels like a little thing to someone else is going to be a huge thing.
Right.
But for someone else is just they do it every day. For you, seems like I would never go to that level. And that's the secret. No one knows what someone else's material is in their class. No one knows what another soul's level is. And we're all there working, and you have no way of looking at someone else where they're at and what they're accomplishing. And someone could look like they've just got everything covered, and they're just having a terrible day, and right now they're dropping from their level, and they're actually, in a sense, degrading the quality of the world around them. And I might be having a really, triumphant day where I'm overcompensating something, but someone looks at me from the outside and says, this person doesn't even know how to read Talmud. I mean, how can they be contributing to the world, right? So there's an internal classroom that each soul is in, and we have no way of getting into each other's classrooms. And yeah, some things seem big and small, but it's totally relative. Like what for you is small, for someone else may be something else. Good spot to stop. Beautiful work. Thanks, everybody.
Is that next week's? Right there?
This is the blessings of the Shema.
Oh, you don't have next week's printed up yet?
Next week's?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, the next.
I think we'll. I don't think we'll get past the end of. Maybe we will. No, I haven't
Okay, 'cause
copied 13 yet.
I'll be in Florida next week, so I was going to follow you online, but I'll just.
Okay. Well, bring your Tanya. So if we. Well, you don't do checked luggage for Florida. Okay. It's online too. I mean, it's all available online. If you need to open it up, you can find it. And, yeah.
Book too heavy?
No, I don't have the actual time to look. I use it online.
Thanks, everybody. Good stuff.